on a row of seats looking up at the ceiling. And I remember just putting all the pills in my mouth at the same time just because I wanted the pain to go away so bad.
Okay. Hey, guys. Welcome back to the Two Thumbs Up podcast. This is Dr. T here today. One of my buddies here I got with us, Derik Stevenson. Welcome to the show, Derik. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, and, pleasure to come on with you.
We're excited to, just chat for a few minutes and see what see what life's brought your way. But
absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about, just so everybody knows who you are, sort of your background, what you've, your history at BYU, those types of things.
Yeah. Born in Southern California, down by the beach. I miss it during the Utah winters, but came up here after graduating high school to go to BYU. I was raised LDS in California, really the only LDS kid in my high school that I didn't know of any other LDS kids. And, I had a lot of opportunities to go check out different college football teams.
So in high school, you did track, you played football.
Yeah, I played soccer. I was a goalkeeper. I played, I ran track, did the pole vault, played on the basketball team. But, football, my pops told me early on, I don't have any money to send you kids to school. If you guys want to get to school, you're going to have to figure out a way to go to college. And I really wanted to figure out how to play college football. So really dedicated myself to becoming the best football player that I could. And, had the opportunity to look around the country at lots of different colleges. But BYU kind of was pulling at me. I was blessed to be raised by some pretty good parents, and I really wanted to go into an environment that was going to be good for me. And growing up in Southern California, you see a lot of environments that are not. So
right.
I really wanted to escape that wild world, being a teenager growing up in LA and Orange County, and wanted to get to a place where I thought it could make me become, the best man, future father that I could be. I felt really fortunate because at 17, as I was going on these recruiting trips, I kept thinking to myself, where is the best place for me to become a good dad? And that's a really weird thing for a 16, 17-year-old to think.
Well, the truth, you had a good dad.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I hear about, things, I read a lot and listen to podcasts, and there's so much talk these days about childhood trauma, and it never resonated with me.
Yeah.
As we'll talk about later, I'm sure, like a lot of my real trauma came in my 30s and 40s. And I feel like I was really lucky as a young man, where I wanted better for myself. And I really, at the end of the day, didn't care about football as a long-term career or to make money or become famous. It was just a mechanism to get me a college degree, help me, meet the right person and, have a family. And I, just thought that BYU compared to USC or University of Miami, BYU was going to be that environment that kind of helped me grow and learn and become the type of man that I wanted to be. So I chose BYU, and I did sit down with all the head coaches at the different schools, and I told them, and this is the early 90s, I told them.
92 was it?
Yeah, I wanted to go on an LDS church mission. And most college football programs at the time, they didn't support that, besides BYU.
That's true.
Maybe Utah a little bit. But the other coaches were just like, why the hell would you want to do that? Why would you want to go leave college football for 2 years? And, I would tell them, there's more important things to me than football. Some of them were kind of taken back because I guess a lot of the kids looking to go play for these different coaches, football was their ticket. It was the one thing that they saw as a way to help them build a successful life. And I didn't
especially
look at it
back then at schools like Miami, UCLA. That was they probably thought you were speaking a different language, right?
And maybe I turned off some of those coaches, but Lavelle Edwards said, "You're darn right, you're going." I care a lot more about you as a young man than I do about you as one of my football players.
Beautiful.
Which is a beautiful thing to me, and the reason that I really was like, I'm going to go here. It's going to be good.
So 1992, then you went to England for a couple years.
Yeah. 1992, I showed up. I was a skinny freshman, a 200-pound linebacker, which isn't, So, it was good. I was going to be able to go. I went to England for 2 years, put on a little bit of weight, came back, and, had a really, for the most part, positive experience at BYU, especially playing for such a great man as Lavelle, who kind of told my father, as my father dropped me off at 18, kind of told my dad, I'll take over from here. And my dad said, well, I've taught him everything that I know, so good luck, And Lavelle was right there with me, helping me. He never, ever sat me down and talked to me about football. He would always want to know how my grades were. He would want to know if I'm dating anybody. He'd want to know how my parents are doing. And, I've heard that he was really good at coaching his coaches in their meetings, but he never said anything to me out on the field about technique or plays or anything. It was just, he was going to let his coaches do their magic, and he was going to, be the guy that you could lean on when you needed help.
So a true leader, he just inspired people and made them better just by the way he showed up.
Yeah, absolutely. Very different than most of the others that wanted a lot of attention. They wanted to have a lot of credit, those sorts of things. But he was just the guy that, even when I had some troubles at BYU and, got into a little trouble with the honor code or with the law. Yeah. Because I did grow up LDS, but I grew up in Southern California running with, 20, non-religious kids who were really good friends even to this day. But, I don't know. He was just really, really good about being a secondary father figure.
And you can jump into this or not. I'll let you choose. But, I was kind of doing some background. I've known you a long time, and I was just kind of like looking back. And, the good old internet's out there. Yeah. And there's actually a beautiful story about you. And I know at the time in 1997, you probably didn't think it was such a beautiful story.
Yeah.
But in the article you wrote that really touched my heart was you get one phone call.
Yeah.
And you wrote something about that.
Yeah.
And if you want to jump into that, I'll
absolutely
open. Yeah. That's entirely up to you. But just what you wrote, and folks, if you get a chance, jump online. I mean, it's a beautiful story. It's a story of accountability. It's a story of learning. It's a story of a young man going through some stuff. And so it touched my heart, honestly. And I read it, and I was going to see if you wanted to chat about that or talk about, that experience with Coach Edwards and the one call.
Yeah. Yeah, I got arrested for getting into a fight down at another college. Me and some friends went down to Snow College to meet up with some other friends, and it turned into a really ugly situation. Trying to protect myself, defend my friends, made some poor decisions and got arrested. And at the time, I was initially charged with attempted murder. Some of the security guards at the school, they were friends with some of the football players on that team. And they told the police officers that I was trying to kill people when I was just trying to defend myself. And so, I was in the jail that night, kind of looking out the cell window, just thinking, I've ruined my entire life. Here I am. I just got off a church mission a year ago. I had met the woman that I thought I was going to marry, and I felt like I had made a real poor decision and threw everything away.
Yeah.
And as people know, you get one phone call from jail, and I was scared to death to call him, but I knew that I had to call Coach Edwards. And he just says, just tell me everything from beginning to end. Just tell me all of it. And he says, we'll work through this, don't worry about it. And I'm like, Coach, how could I not worry about it? Like I could have just thrown away my entire life. I said I did. I threw away my entire future, my entire life. And he says, you know what? And he drove down to Ephraim, I don't know, hour and a half from Provo, and convinced the district attorney to let me out without bail. And he promised the district attorney, I'll make sure he comes back to court and he meets with you and we work through this. And as soon as we got back to Provo, he says, we're going up to the honor code office. We're going to talk to them. And man, what a hard time for a young man to have to, I don't know, be accountable for, something like that, and go and sit in front of, judges and the district attorney, and sit in front of my parents and my coaches and then the administrators of the school, and then talk to my teammates about the mistake that I had made. It was a real eye-opening lesson for me. It was so painful going through that. And then, BYU asked me to withdraw from school or else they were going to kick me out. Even though initially they had said that they were going to support me and stand behind me because, BYU kind of knew the entire story that I had told them.
Right.
But then once, it came out in the media a couple of days later, what had happened kind of on a surface level, BYU said, you're going to have to withdraw from school. And, I had to go through some court cases. All the charges got dropped. I did some community service, and, Lavelle Edwards kept calling me saying, how are you doing? And, I was just struggling through it. And he said, keep going. And he says, eventually we'll get you back here. We'll get you back on the team.
Wow.
And he just, a lot of other folks at BYU kind of turned their back, and he refused to. And, it was a real blessing to have a man like that stand behind you, even when, people in his circle, his peers at the school, had all turned their back on me.
Sure.
So I'm not going to turn my back on this young man. I promised his father I would step in his place and take care of him. And, Lavelle has another 99 guys to do that for, right? But he would have me in his office every week, and, and talking with some of the other guys that I see, every March, he did the same thing for them. And I just
It reminds me of a story that I've heard, and we've all heard it, where a gentleman went to find the lost sheep.
Yeah.
And that's when you're telling the story, and I read it on the internet, it reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Of that gentle soul that sought after the one to bring back to the 99.
Right.
And so, that's, like, again, that story, what you wrote a piece about this.
Yeah. When he passed away, I wrote a piece, with that story in mind, just about they wanted the website wanted, to know, more about his football career. But that's really what he wasn't for me. He was much bigger than that. He was much bigger, much more important than college football.
I love it.
Yeah.
But let's jump into college football a little bit. For all the goods, the ups, the downs, the sideways of it all, we love the game. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
The game. I mean, it's a great game. And associated with that game there's injury associated with that game. And as we all know, injury can lead to life-changing experiences down the road. We see it across all sports, whether it's a simple rotator cuff tear or a head trauma, which is not insignificant, which is very significant. You know, are you open to sharing a little bit about your experience with some of the injuries you've had, some of the roads you've walked down, you know, related to head trauma or, you know, post-concussive syndrome, that type of thing?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, pretty, I'm pretty honest when I look back at my level of talent. There are a lot of really talented football players at BYU. And, you know, I was never one of those guys that was the strongest. I was never the fastest. I kind of felt like I had one advantage over, you know, other players. And it's, you know, I was, you know, my teammates, when I do see them, they still laugh and they think I'm a little bit of a wild man, a little crazy. You know, there are some, you know, I couldn't do everything else, but I could, you know, really throw my head into a wedge of blockers better than anybody else. Mm-hmm. Just, you know, not being scared to do that. I kind of developed this reputation, you know, and it starts when you're young, kind of on special teams, playing on the kickoff and, you know, trying to break the wedge and blow up these bigger guys. And I kind of developed a bit of a reputation as being that guy that would sacrifice his body. And even, you know, after college, you know, I did get a shot to play in the NFL for the Miami Dolphins for a couple of years. And it was because they needed guys that were, you know, willing to sacrifice their bodies back then and your brain. And, you know, looking back, you know, people ask me if I would do it all over again because, you know, once you get a few pretty severe concussions, they start to come more rapidly. And even the you know, the slightest of hits on the side of your head or something can trigger, you know, another concussion. And, you know, all through playing at BYU, and then for the first couple of years that I tried to play in the NFL, I just kept getting one after the next. And, you know, it just got to the point where, you know, I was really close to having my degree at BYU, and my brain just felt cloudy and foggy and kind of a little depressed sometimes. And it was a lot more mysterious back then. I think it still is pretty mysterious.
Yeah.
The brain
What was some of the, back then, some of the protocols you would go through, if you recall, you know, the evaluation and maybe some treatment, or was there anything like that back then?
Yeah, there was no treatment besides rest. But, you know, if you could follow the coach's finger, and they were letting coaches give us the test,
right?
You know, then you go back in, you know, shake it off.
You know, it's such an interesting thing. And even, you know, 25, 28 years later, you know, this is one of the reasons I love what we're doing with concussion pros. Because of this, it's still, we're still searching, right? Mm. Even 28 years later, you know, you see guys. I watched you know, a lot of football this last season, and you know when someone's been hit.
Yeah.
And it was a playoff game, Matthew Stafford, and it was and they actually cut the replay because you could see what his eyes did when he hit the ground, and he was out. You know, he was concussed, but he was back in the next play. So even today, with increased awareness towards concussive events and increased protocols, we kind of still get the same. And I'm notably, it's improved. I would say it's improved. I'm not saying we haven't made great strides, and I'm grateful for that. But we still have that. You know, you described your passion for the game and how you were identified as, like, when it comes to it, Derik, he'll handle this, right? Yeah. And it was kind of your badge of honor, right? And you did it willingly. And there's still that desire to be the greatest and be the best. And so share with us a little bit about, you know, back then the protocols were limited. You know, the testing was limited. The treatment was essentially non-existent. What what were some of the results you experienced because you just continued to play?
Yeah, I think, the concussions combined with, when you get a lot of head injuries, you can also get a lot of neck injuries.
Mm-hmm.
I used to get what they call stingers, where, when you go in and you hit somebody with your forehead, sometimes it compresses the spine and that pinches that nerve, the one that goes down either side of your arm. And they were the most painful thing that I've ever gone through.
And
Just
what's the phraseology? Oh, he just got a stinger.
you just got a
It's
stinger,
just a stinger.
right? Because it's
But tell us
just the
about that.
nerves, right?
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah. It's just your
like your
nerves.
arm's on fire, and
Yeah.
you just want to get your shoulder
Yeah.
pads off.
Yeah.
But you keep playing because your bones aren't broken, your muscles
Right.
aren't torn. It's just
Yeah.
pain. And the coaches would always ask, are you hurt or are you injured? Because you really do get hurt almost every single play. So you're
That's
always
true.
hurt. And you get a few games into the season and your body starts to be in a lot of pain and break down. By the time, we had one season where we played 15 games, which at the time was two more than any college football team had ever played. We were 14-1 at the end of the season, but 15 games into the season, back then, NFL teams didn't even play that many games in a year. But, you get to 10 games and I was truly being held together, like with medical tape and painkillers, muscle relaxers. And, I don't know if it was worse at BYU. Maybe some factors, with the culture play into the fact that, prescription drugs are okay. Don't do heroin, don't smoke weed.
The culture
Don't
is
snort
the culture there
coke.
is.
But if a doctor prescribes it,
it's okay.
you're okay.
Okay.
And I remember, especially my senior year, we played down at Alabama, our very first game, and we almost won. We're a few points away. But I remember getting onto the plane, having had, a couple of severe stingers, the doctors and the coaches being concerned because, I was almost in tears, and the doctors, they gave me enough pain pills and muscle relaxers to endure, a 5-hour flight back, get you to the next, Sunday morning where you're back at treatment. They give you enough drugs to get you through the
So
night.
the next day, Sunday, you're back in the training room, getting some treatments, that type of thing. So,
Yeah. Yeah. But, between the end of the game and treatment, they got to keep you comfortable. So they give you, they would give us a little manila envelope full of pills, take one of these every 3 hours until we see you, at noon tomorrow. And, I was a kid that I grew up in Southern California. All my friends drank and smoked weed, and I just never touched the stuff. And, I remember being, 23 years old, and I go to lay down in the plane, and I look at these pills, and I'm just like in so much pain. I laid down on a row of seats looking up at the ceiling, and I remember just putting all of the pills in my mouth at the same time, just because I wanted the pain to go away so bad. And I remember it was the first time in my life that I had used drugs and got high.
Quite the journey, yeah.
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 Yeah, quite the journey.
So you walk through a lot of that, everything from, the pain meds to all of that. So talk to us a little bit about what you feel like in your life, if you're open to it, with the concussions and some of the pain syndromes you've experienced. What, mental health wise, what have you been through? What have you learned? And through all of that, what I love to hear about is, from what you've learned, how has it changed your life for the positive, for the better, and I love the word gratitude.
Yeah.
Like, what are you grateful for now because you walked through all of this stuff? So maybe start at the beginning and tell us a little bit about what you feel like a lot of this has done to your mental health, physical health, obviously, but mental health as well.
Yeah. You can edit this out, but one of the challenges I have, I've done a lot of sports radio and some podcasts and stuff, and I do have a lot of times in my life where I can tell that something's wrong. I don't really know how to describe it. And, my co-host or partner doing radio or podcasts will kind of look across the table at me when, sometimes my brain just stops processing whatever thought I was trying to express. It'll just stop. And I started, after retiring from football, I started seeing that happen more and more, where I thought it would start, occurring less and less. But, so I've gone back to BYU a few times to, ask for advice, see if any of the other guys have come back with similar issues, tried to figure out suggestions for, having my brain looked at.
Right.
And I went and did just a whole battery of MRIs and scans and for a couple of days. And then they gave me on CD-ROM all of the brain images where they just couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
They couldn't see any damage in there. And I just said, this cannot be right. Something's going on.
And we see that a lot, right? Mm-hmm. And so imaging has improved and it continues to improve, and we're getting better and better. But the interesting thing about concussion is there's actually nothing, generally speaking, on MRI or CT scan, there's actually nothing to see because it's an inflammatory event of the brain tissue, and that's not going to show up on imaging.
Right.
So I think the frustrating part sometimes for people that have had this type of injury is they go and they get all this imaging done, but then their doctor says, well, it's all in your head, and you're right. You're like, you're damn right it's in my head. That's where it's at.
Right.
But it also, this is why I love these conversations, because the awareness of it, to not discount your experience.
Yeah.
Because like we say, if you've seen one concussion, you've seen one concussion. No one has, may have a similar experience to yours.
Yeah.
But no one is walking around with your brain other than you.
Yeah.
And so to be a practitioner that is aware of that and say, you know what? There is something going on. We may not see it on CT or MRI, but we're going to figure this out together.
Yeah. And I think, when you hang up your football helmet at 25 or 26, or for some guys 30, 35, I mean, you're kind of already going through some mental health struggles with, giving up your identity that you've built over your first 30 years on this planet. You're losing that. And so, when you start to recognize, challenges that you're having in your mind, you start to wonder, and, your ego is still trying to hang on to, some sort of, I don't know. It's like you have to start a whole new life over. And here you are, you feel like you have this maybe damaged brain. You have a damaged body because they can see that, but you don't feel as mentally sharp or acute or aware as you did a few years ago.
Mental acuity, depression.
Yeah, you start
anxiety,
to feel depressed and you're like, I've never felt depressed before. Is this a result of all these concussions, or is it just me not being able to do what I love anymore?
Well, then you start questioning yourself, because if nothing's showing up on MRI or CT. Maybe I'm what?
Yeah, maybe I'm making it up.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm making it up.
So self-doubt, all those things.
And you worry about your body or your mind breaking down already in your late 20s, and then you start to doubt yourself. But then, you've got this ego, and you're in this culture where people have been looking up to you as a role model and a hero, and they want to hear you speak in public, and you start to think to yourself, I'm not any of those good things things that these people think that I am. And you're standing up in front of, I remember speaking to a church full of probably 500 kids. And I wondered why they looked up to me and they gave my words more weight than they give like their dad or their mom or their grandparents. Why because I play football did these kids, and I remember beating myself up thinking, plus you're a drug addict, and you can't even be honest about it. And here you are standing up in front of all these kids telling them what good people they can be when you yourself, you're not that great person that you're talking about. You're not that great person that they think that you are. And so you start to, go through the rounds in your head with yourself, just beating yourself up. And, you wonder how much of it has to do with the concussions, how much of it has to do with, the change in lifestyle and not being able to do what you love anymore. And the pressures of the culture in Provo
and now you compound,
intense.
You're married now, you're bringing kids into the world, all of those things. Yes.
Yeah. And I remember, I used to I had 4 daughters, and I took my little girls in to bed at night. And I just remember still, 15 years after leaving BYU, I was still using prescription drugs. Doctors around here, if you're a former football player, they'll still prescribe you medication. And I remember tucking my little girls in, just wondering, why is your love for them like not strong enough to help you like figure out this stuff and stop using these drugs and stop blaming, your challenges in life on, your football career and things like that. And, we got together like we do every March for spring football.
Which is coming up again here.
So, next week. Yeah. All the guys fly in from all over the country. And, it's pretty apparent. It was to me, 10 years ago when I first started really thinking about these things where, I'd look at my former teammates and you can just tell that something's not right. They could probably tell with me. I could tell with them. We could see it in each other. We're still, at the time 10 years ago, our egos were still not, allowing us to be vulnerable enough to pull.
It's a great word.
Pull somebody aside and say, hey, do you need something? Like, do you need help? Like, we need to form some sort of network. Like, we're dealing with, possibly CTE, but obviously some mental health issues. Most of us are going through divorce because of bad choices brought in to your life through addiction or, other things. And, everybody has this story, and I don't know if it's compounded at BYU because of the culture, the unwillingness to be open and honest about your flaws or challenges or problems or weaknesses.
So have you all formed, this is super interesting to me, by the way, because you're touching on something that I love, is that have you formed sort of and I know you have a brotherhood with these guys, but have you formed some sort of the ability to communicate about these things together or to talk through these things together that some of these former athletes are experiencing, or is it still kind of they hide it behind the cloak of hey, I got it all together?
Yeah, it's an informal network. A lot of us we had a former teammate from Los Angeles that he passed away about 7 years ago. We all went down to Dallas to his funeral, and we all agreed that, we're not, and he died from, he drank himself to death. And this is a guy that had the biggest personality. He was the life of the party. Just everybody loved him. But he had this disease that he was just struggling with, and it finally killed him, at 38 years old. And, a lot of us agreed to start to network more with each other, let other guys know, for those of us that have gone public with some of the challenges that we've struggled with, we wanted other guys to know that, we can be there for each other. We don't have to, be scared anymore of being vulnerable. The last thing you want to be as a football player is vulnerable, right. Expose yourself to, to pain or something. But, letting guys know and kind of working, through this informal network to support and love and care for each other.
The group of guys that are kind of walked through some of these similar experiences, and you sort of have an informal group, and has that assisted some of them? And you talk to them frequently? Do they reach out? Because I just see this, you're in a unique position because you did play college football and you played some pro football, and you've had these things. We deal with folks in a clinic setting that may not have had as many concussions as you've had, for example, but have had one or two from either a motor vehicle accident, a snowboarding accident, a skiing accident, some sort of, weekend warrior trauma. And they suffer some of the very same symptoms you're describing. And so, having the background of a former football player, you have a unique perspective on it. But also, there's so many folks walking around out there that just played high school football. I mean, I've had concussions in high school football that I know contributed to some of my mental health things that I've taken a look at, and depression and anxiety and those types of things. And so then you take, a mom who's driving her car through an intersection and gets hit, or for example, my wife, Melanie, gets in a bike accident, significant concussion. And so we're all in this sort of collective. We all have heads, we all have brains, and we all have gravity.
Yeah.
And so this sort of thing happens. And I love the idea that you guys, as former teammates, have created sort of an informal, whether how to what degree it's working, at least there's an awareness. And you keep mentioning the word vulnerability, and I love that word, because as badasses like you guys still are, by the way, and were, to be vulnerable for a football player to say, really for a human to say, anybody, that they are vulnerable, to actually say, you know what, something's going on here, and it's time to talk about it. And that's one thing I love about doing these podcasts is, like, let's talk about it, because there's possibilities if we come together as a community. Yeah. And what's been some of the results or informal results you've had with some of the former players and connections you've made that way?
Yeah. I think the thing that really broke all of our hearts as we were at Brian's funeral down in Dallas is, he never called any of us. None of us knew. And, when you try and be the tough guy on the football team, you don't want your teammate to know, your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities. And, and he wasn't the type of guy that would be a recluse. He was very extroverted, and he was the guy calling everybody else. He just wasn't calling everybody else to ask for help, and, it's kind of a weird thing, because you don't want to be that guy that, shows weakness and reaches out and asks for help. You want to be that guy that they come to for help, though.
Yeah.
You're willing to fight for them, help them, do anything. Like, I would do anything for those guys. I mean, I would. When you literally fight together and help each other get through, BYU academically and compete on the football field, like, you will do anything for each other, but you're just too scared to ask them. And I think that was the barrier that we've been trying to break down over the last decade. And it's pretty cool because, we're old enough where we played with a lot of the guys that are down there coaching now. And they've started to implement a lot of changes and a lot of things that are going to be really positive in the future. You know, we had one of the football players about 5 years ago come off his mission and go back and start playing at BYU, and then he got a DUI. Mm-hmm. You know, Kalani called me up because Kalani knows, you know, how close I was with Brian and, you know, some of these other guys. You know, we've had so many guys in their 30s and 40s pass away from our team already. They're already dead. And Kalani and some of the other coaches down there, they don't want to keep that going. So they'll reach out to guys like me and they'll be like, hey, this kid just got a DUI. Like, come here, he gets out of jail at this time, come down here, I want you to be with him. You know, take him, help him find an AA meeting, like help him get into support groups, be there for him as a mentor. You know, let him know, or he'll bring me in to kind of talk to, you know, the football team, the incoming freshmen.
So the things you're just talking about, humility, what you've learned, vulnerability, the ability now to literally share your experience with others that may give them some insight into what they're experiencing, whether they're just leaving the NFL, for example, or it's a kid that, you know, ran into some trouble while he was still in school. But you were talking about some of the things you're grateful for because of all this.
Yeah, you know, being vulnerable is it's a blessing, and I wonder now why I resisted it for so long, because the way that I can connect with a young man is by, you know, sitting down with him like this and just say, you know what, man, I've really had a lot of challenges, and you know, I'm no different than you as a 14-year-old. The kids are always like, what do you mean? You know, of course you are. Yeah. I'm like, no, you know, I'm just this, you know, soul trying to get through this life and learn. And, you know, our paths are probably going to be different, but, you know, there are a lot of things that are exactly the same. Yeah. And that, you know, when life gets hard and you have to try and figure things out and do things a little differently and lose your ego and those sorts of things, like, it's a real blessing. And you can feel the connection between you and another person when you're vulnerable. And you can also feel when you used to try and connect to people and you wouldn't be vulnerable, where it's just a waste of time. And
it's like no bounces off. And you mentioned your daughter just got home from Taiwan. You just nailed something. This is what I love. So I served in Taiwan too. There's a phrase in Chinese called 废话,我不会废话, meaning 我不会废话. I will not waste my words. 废话 means I will wasted words. So you hit something there when you're in a conversation that's not a vulnerable conversation. You may as well just save your words.
Yeah.
我不会废话.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, wait a second here. But when two people, when you walk through the fire and you have someone that's open to it, what's the result?
Yeah, you can make progress because you can connect.
Oh, man. Thank you, brother. And like I said, we'll do this again sometime. You wrote a book? Do you want to highlight that?
It's not published.
It's not published, but we'll get that out there. We'll talk about that someday. And
then after the alumni game next week, I'm playing in a football game. I'll be back in here with some memories and get some